Games for the longest time have come in different shapes and sizes. You got the classic FPS games like Half-Life 2, survival games like Project Zomboid, still waiting on build 42 before I do a video on it, and even RTS games like Company of Heroes 2 and Hearts of Iron. But the common drawback I have with RTS games nowadays is their setting. I've noticed that a large majority of RTS games are more fantasy focused. It's either medieval fantasy with dragons and goblins as soldiers for your kingdom, or ants, or futuristic warfare that happens between the United States and the Soviet Union because Albert Einstein decided to go back in time and kill the Austrian with the funny mustache, none of which unfortunately piqued my interest. I wanted to play something more realistic and something more contemporary as I got tired of the World War II stuff, and just my luck at that time, Epic was offering Wargame Red Dragon for free on their platform, so I installed it and I gave it a try. And I hated it. The mechanics and the layout was so different from what I had experienced before in prior RTS games. Not to mention, I found the tutorial quite difficult to comprehend. But that could just be me being stupid. But eventually, after watching some YouTube tutorials and a friend of mine who kept encouraging me to try the game again, I managed to get interested again, and once I understood the fundamentals, the game became a joy to play. I especially loved playing China with its tank rushing capability and infantry spam. But aside from its Cold War setting, I just really enjoyed playing Wargame because of its details and their sheer amount of unique units. The game is a depiction of the Cold War going hot, with Western democratic forces going against the Eastern Communist bloc in East Asia, with sort of accurate units ranging from air to navy for each respective nation, and a fantastic deck building system that I sunk hours into trying to get the perfect deck. So when I heard a new wargame was being made by Eugen Systems, I got pretty excited. A new wargame meant better visuals, better AI, and a better UI. So did they hit these goals? Kinda. I feel like before we discuss whether WARNO is the ultimate successor to Wargame, I should briefly explain the synopsis of the game. So WARNO takes place in Europe 1987 in a scenario where the Cold War goes hot. In a world where Mikhail Gorbachev and his reformists were ousted out of power in 1987 and replaced with a troika representing the Communist Party, the KGB, and the Soviet Army, things aren't looking great for the average Soviet citizen.
Was that the bite of 80s?
With any other party opposition being aggressively put down, and even neutral Finland surrendering to the USSR's aggressive policies and becoming a puppet via a backed communist coup. This reignites the tension of the Cold War, resulting in high military spending and more training in NATO Western forces, and crippling sanctions applied to the USSR that caused food shortages and a worsening economy. A large-scale military exercise bigger than the previous Reforger exercises was then announced by NATO. The USSR, suspecting that the exercise was an elaborate smokescreen for a real attack, prepares to strike first under the cover of their own military exercise. It is then on the June 20th when Soviet troops are mobilized and break through Western Germany's border with the element of surprise. A warning order is then issued by NATO, and World War III begins in Europe, between the Western NATO forces and the Eastern Warsaw Pact. And that's basically the rough backstory of WARNO. Now with that out of the way, we can now begin to talk about the game's strongest element, which is its visuals. The visuals in WARNO are, in one word, stunning. You can tell Eugen Systems, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, really sunk in a lot of effort into ensuring the game looks as realistic as possible, and at the same time very optimized. Every infantry, every aircraft, and every tank is surprisingly accurately designed to their real-life counterpart. For example, let's look at this M1A1 Abrams. Now, make no mistake, I'm not a tank expert by any means. I'm not a tank guy by any means. But just by looking at this tank, I can easily identify it as an Abrams, with its recognizable shape and woodland camo exterior. If you're an expert in tanks, please do leave a comment down below and let me know if I'm wrong. But let's look at a more beautiful and well done model, the Mi-24D Descent. Everything in this helicopter looks so highly detailed, from the weapons to the tail rotors. Although it doesn't have as many weapons as the other Mi-24 variants in this game, its camouflage is the most recognizable out of all the other variants and thus makes it much more iconic. Combining this with its signature cockpit design, and you have a very menacing but beautiful Soviet attack helicopter.
Behind D.
I think this model and the M1A1 that I showed earlier make a very good first impression for the game's visuals. There are tons of other models to talk about that are as highly detailed as these examples, but I think you get the picture. The unit models in this game are absolutely one of the points where the game shines, but now let's talk about something bigger. Let's talk about the environment. In terms of the environment, WARNO has a mix of maps that suit the game's setting. You have maps like Danger Hills, which are much more open combat focused, and then you have maps like Urban Frontlines that, as you can guess, focus much more on urban warfare. It is a wonderful mix of maps, however, I wouldn't go so far as to say that these map environments are super nice to look at, but they are absolutely good enough. Furthermore, you probably won't have enough time to appreciate the map's beauty while fighting off your enemies. One cool thing about these maps is the environmental destruction that they bring. Artillery or any sort of mortar will create some shell holes in the ground, and buildings can be destroyed with enough destructive power. It's a very neat touch visual-wise and also gameplay-wise. The VFX and SFX also shouldn't go unnoticed as well. The VFX in WARNO comes in many forms, be it flashes from weapon discharges and realistic tracer rounds or particle effects like fire or smoke. Talking about the SFX, each sound in this game is meticulously made for each action, which adds so much depth into this game. Vehicles, aircraft, explosions, and small arms fire are just a few examples. Combining this with the VFX and the animation, I can guarantee that you will be immersed throughout this game. Now, there is one grievance that I have with this game, which is its voice acting.
Bundeswehr's 5th Panzer Division in the north has been joined by the US 3rd Armored Division.
It sounds fake and awkward at times, even leading some in the community to believing that it's AI, but then it becomes goofy, like they're in some sort of cartoon and not in a war zone. Additionally, the voice lines from my experience repeat a lot. Now, I get that if the voice acting was too realistic, it could come off as really cheesy, but it kind of pisses me off when my US soldiers say, "Beware, Tommy's nearby," for the millionth time. But that's just me. Moving on, even with all these visuals, these sounds, and these animations, the game is still pretty well optimized and runs well.
I'm currently running an RTX 3080 with an AMD Ryzen 7 7700X on a 2K monitor screen.
And WARNO was running at a smooth 120 FPS at max graphics at the start of my 8-player skirmish, and near to the end it went down to just shy of 100, which I think are good results. Overall, the visuals in WARNO are outstanding and a definite improvement from its predecessors, alongside with its excellent optimization. I'd even dare to say that WARNO might be one of the more beautiful and detailed games that I've ever played. It's just unfortunate that you can't usually take in the view because you'll be too busy fighting the AI. On the topic of AI, let's discuss the gameplay of WARNO. Similar to Wargame, you are able to customize your own deck in WARNO, but unlike Wargame, you don't have the liberty of selecting whatever soldiers you want. You are instead limited to what that particular division has. What this means is that you can't select any unit that's outside of your division set. For example, I can only have this T-72 tank in these divisions shown down here. All divisions are unique from one another and have their own specialities, but it typically boils down to either infantry, armored, or airborne focused. So armored divisions will have more choices when it comes to tanks than airborne, and airborne units will have more planes and or helicopters. I guess Eugen did this to make the game more realistic like what they did with Steel Division, but if you're not a fan, the game does have workshop support and there is a mod that circumvents this limiting feature. And just one more point, although you don't need to create a custom division, it is highly recommended, as noted by some in the community. The preset decks aren't exactly fantastic. So take your time and pick what suits your playstyle. Do note that you can't use any decks while playing Army General or Operations mode. These are two of the three modes that you can select in WARNO. In Operations mode, you basically play a single player narrative driven mission, and in Army General, you commandeer an entire force in a massive campaign that you can play with your friends. Both are decently fun, but I generally prefer to play on Skirmish, which is a mode that allows you to hop into a battle with your own configurations, like your own deck, the enemy's difficulty level, the enemy's deck, your map choice, and you can even play with friends. Now when playing the actual game itself, here's how it works. There's a pre-planning phase where you can place down your troops and plan out your entire attack. Once you're ready, you can launch the battle. Your main objective most of the time would be to capture and hold on to as many points as you can on the map, or in some cases to completely annihilate the enemy. On skirmish mode, you can change these objectives by changing the combat rules, and other factors like score limits and time limits are also present. But aside from that, that's basically what you have to achieve in every game of WARNO. Now let's move on to the actual match gameplay. WARNO's gameplay really shines because of how much depth it brings to the table with its combined warfare focus. You've got various kinds of units to work with, like tanks, helicopters, jets, and infantry, and using them all together makes the battlefield more dynamic and realistic. Not to mention, you kind of are required to use them together if you want to win. It's not just about you throwing units at the enemy, it's about how well you plan and coordinate them. When everything comes together, it's incredibly satisfying and shows just how much thought the game rewards. Let me put it like this, you could bum rush with an entire army of cheap tanks, which would most likely result in half of them dying, or you could scout ahead first using a recon helicopter, marking the heavily defended locations, getting your artillery to bomb said locations into smithereens, and once the dust has settled, then bum rushing with cheap tanks. Mastering logistics is also something you have to pick up from playing WARNO. In this game, you don't have an infinite supply depot or infinite supply transports, and if you don't supply your units, they'll most often become entirely useless because they usually deplete their resources quite fast. So it's essential for you to divide your supply as well and to keep your supply transport vehicles alive. Vehicles and aircraft in this game are modeled true to their real-life counterpart, and this also extends to their weapons and their armor. The best example I could give for this would be tanks. Most tanks have heavily reinforced frontal armor but significantly weaker protection at the rear, making them highly vulnerable to attacks from behind. As a result, back shots with anti-armor weapons or other tanks become an incredibly effective strategy. Moving on, there are additional features like stunning and suppression that can easily affect units and their effectiveness. Like helicopters. Helicopters can be easily stunned by anti-air units, making them spin around until they get destroyed. Focusing back onto the combined warfare aspect, WARNO has a myriad of unique types of units and even subtypes for said units. For the air category, you have fighters that are dedicated to air superiority and defense, that are outfitted with more air-to-air weaponry and usually are more agile. On the other side, you have support aircraft that are much more focused on close air support. They are naturally more outfitted with bombs and missiles that can pummel any infantry or tank to the ground. These kinds of roles aren't just limited to aircraft, but other categories also have their own fair share of special units. Roles like this make the game much more fun to play, and also kind of forces you to learn more about what kind of units you are actually deploying and how you can fully utilize them. And of course, it does make the game much more realistic and adds a lot more depth. There is a vital aspect to the gameplay that I haven't touched on yet, which is the AI. Now, is the AI good in WARNO? It's hard to say. It's not fantastic because the AI on any level of difficulty loves to beeline and bum rush points. It also likes to plop its units down onto one point and wait, forcing you to attack, or the game won't make any progress at all. But there is always that 50% chance that the AI uses its intelligence to plan an impressive attack on you. There have been occasions when the AI would secretly move their anti-air units and tanks closer to my base to shoot down any supply helicopter or truck that passes by, completely cutting off supply to my soldiers, which is crazy effective. I will say this as well, the AI does have a better memory and response compared to Wargame. For example, if the AI spots your anti-air, they will most often not use their air units until they know it's destroyed or completely gone. So while the AI does make some questionable decisions and definitely needs more tweaking, it's much smarter and makes way better decisions than Wargame's AI. That said, I think overall that the AI is decent and a good improvement. Now I understand a large portion of you watching this video might be wondering about the multiplayer. And as far as I know, the multiplayer scene of the game is quite popular. Moreover, the gameplay and overall system shouldn't change, but do take this information with a grain of salt, as the only multiplayer I do is between friends. So, is WARNO good? The short answer is yes, it is. WARNO is one of those games that has a lot to bring to the table and does not disappoint. It is close to being one of my more favorite RTS games, right next to Hearts of Iron 4, but there are some things that I hope that it can improve on in the future, particularly the AI, but also more minor things like the UI and the voice acting. However, I admire the amount of effort that Eugen has sunk into the research and development of the visuals, the models, the animation, and the details of this game. Like I said, WARNO has very beautiful graphics and great optimization customization that make the game a joy to play. I think if you are already a fan of RTS games or a Cold War nerd, that you will like WARNO. But if you are a first-time RTS player looking to get into their first game, I would say WARNO doesn't do a great job at teaching you how to play. Unless you are dedicated to watching YouTube tutorials and have a lot of patience, I would not recommend WARNO as your first RTS game. But that said, please do check out WARNO after this video. Now for some additional rambling, I would first like to say thank you for 200 plus subscribers. It took me by surprise when I first saw the number go from 100 to 200 in a few days, and I'm very happy to see that more and more people are watching my content. I was working on another video after the Intravenous 2 video, yes I know I pronounced it wrong, way before this video, and it was on Streets of Rogue, another top-down shooter. However, I realized that the script and video planning was too ambitious for the time and that I didn't have enough time, so I decided to put it on hold for the time being. God, I said like times 3 times. Now don't worry, I am going to finish that video, I swear, but it will not be so soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching and listening to my rambling on WARNO, and if you liked it, please do consider subscribing. Leave a comment down below for what you'd like to see next. Most likely though, I will be doing a video on Stalker 2, but no promises because it's kind of expensive. I will try to post as much as I can, but you know, I have school projects to work on, so I implore you guys to be patient. But that's it for today's video, and I'll see you next time. Peace!